Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been running for about 5 years now. Started after my doctor told me my cholesterol was getting too high, and I needed to make some lifestyle changes. I was 32 at the time and realizing I couldn't just eat whatever I wanted anymore without consequences. Running seemed like the easiest exercise to start with since I didn't need a gym membership or any fancy equipment. Just shoes and a road. It became a habit pretty quickly. Now I can't imagine my mornings without that half hour of pounding pavement before I head into the office. My current shoes were basically destroyed though. The treads were completely worn down and there was a hole forming near the big toe on my right foot. I've been putting off replacing them for weeks, but finally admitted I needed new ones before I ended up with an injury. I'm not someone who needs the newest, flashiest sneakers on the market. I just want something that fits well and doesn't fall apart after 2 months. That's why I always go to this discount shoe store about 15 minutes from my apartment. They sell last season's models from good brands at way lower prices. The shoes are exactly the same quality, just not the current trend. Works perfectly for me since I don't care about impressing anyone during my morning runs through the neighborhood. So there I was on a Wednesday night after leaving work. The store was pretty empty. Just a handful of people scattered around looking at different sections. I made my way to the athletic shoes and started scanning the shelves for running shoes in my size. Found a pair that looked decent after a few minutes of searching. Gray with some green trim, simple and functional. I grabbed the box and started opening it up to check them out. That's when I heard someone yelling from the other end of the aisle. A woman was shouting at someone to hurry up and come help her once they were done with whatever they were doing. She added that she didn't have all night to wait around. I looked up briefly but didn't see anyone else nearby. Figured maybe she was talking to her kid, who was in another aisle or something. Parents sometimes yell across stores like that even though it's obnoxious. I shrugged and went back to pulling the shoes out of their box. I kicked off my work shoes and slipped on the right shoe first. Felt pretty good. Not too narrow. I grabbed the left one and put that on too. Time to actually test them out properly. I stood up and started doing short little jogs back and forth in the aisle since no one else was around. Just wanted to see if anything rubbed wrong or if they felt unstable. They actually felt great. Really comfortable cushioning and the fit was snug without being tight. I checked the price tag again. $36. Definitely buying these. I was slowly jogging back toward my regular shoes, pretty happy with my find, when something hard slammed into the back of my head. I whipped around, confused and slightly dazed. A massive woman was standing there glaring at me. She had to weigh close to 300 pounds and was wearing clothes that were way too small for her body. Her expression was this weird mix of anger and smugness, like she was mad but also pleased with herself. She started yelling at me about how I should have been paying attention to customers instead of goofing around. Then she told me to get over to her immediately and do my job before she got me fired. It took my brain a few seconds to process what was happening. She threw a shoe at me. She thinks I'm an employee. Holy shit, she actually hit me in the head with a shoe. I shouted back at her asking if she'd lost her mind. I told her I didn't work at the store. Yeah, I actually got to yell that at someone. It felt surreal. I started walking toward her, but suddenly 3 actual employees appeared from different parts of the store and rushed over to us. The woman immediately focused on the guy who seemed to be the manager and launched into this long, angry rant about how I'd been ignoring her and refusing to help her, and was the worst employee she'd ever encountered. Just going on and on with her complaints. I turned to the closest employee, a younger woman, and quietly explained what had actually happened. That I was just a customer trying on shoes, and this person had thrown a shoe at my head. The employee's face went pale. The manager held up his hand and told the woman to stop talking. She looked shocked and demanded to know if he had any idea who she was. She threatened that she'd have everyone's jobs over this treatment. The manager explained that he'd been in the back office and the store had security cameras throughout, He'd watched her throw the shoe and hit me in the head on the monitors. Her face turned bright red. She started sputtering but didn't seem to have any good response to that. The manager said he was calling the police. That's when panic seemed to hit her, and she tried to make a run for it. She spun around and took maybe 2 steps before her foot landed on a shoebox that was sitting in the aisle. The box shot out from under her, and she went down hard. She landed right back on the bench she'd been sitting on before. After that, she just stayed there, breathing hard and looking like she'd given up. A police officer arrived within about 5 minutes. I explained the whole situation to him while the woman kept interrupting to give her own version of events. In her telling, I had somehow thrown the shoe at her instead. The officer looked skeptical but listened to both sides. The manager told the officer that he'd witnessed everything on the security cameras and had already made a copy of the footage. He pulled a small drive out of his pocket and handed it over. The officer looked at the footage timestamp on the drive, then looked at the woman, then back at me. He told her to stand up. She tried to argue, but he wasn't interested in hearing it. He pulled out handcuffs and arrested her right there in the shoe aisle. She was still yelling about getting lawyers and filing lawsuits when he led her out of the store. After they left, the manager came back over and asked if I was okay and if I needed any medical attention. I told him I was fine, just surprised more than anything. A shoe isn't exactly a dangerous weapon. He apologized repeatedly for what happened in his store. Then he insisted on giving me the shoes for free. I tried to tell him that wasn't necessary and he didn't need to do that. He wouldn't take no for an answer though. He walked me up to the register and told the cashier to ring it up as a store incident with no charge. So I walked out with a brand new pair of running shoes that didn't cost me a single cent. Definitely not how I expected my Wednesday evening shopping trip to go, but I'm not complaining about free shoes. I work in quality control at a manufacturing plant. I work the day shift, 7 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. My main job is checking products on the assembly line to make sure they meet company standards before they get packaged and shipped out. That morning I got to work at 6:55 like I always do. I clocked in, grabbed my clipboard from my locker, and walked to my station on the floor. The first few hours went smooth. No major defects, no line stoppages, just a normal morning. Around 10:15 I needed to use the restroom. I walked to the bathroom down the hall, went into a stall, and did my business. When I went to buckle my belt back up, the leather just snapped clean in half right at the buckle. I stood there holding 2 pieces of my belt. The thing had been looking worn for months, the leather cracking and peeling, but I kept meaning to replace it and never got around to it. Now I was standing in a bathroom stall at work with broken pants support and 3 hours left in my shift. I couldn't just walk around holding my waistband all day. I tucked my shirt in tight, pulled my pants up as high as they would go, and hoped everything would stay put until lunch. I made it back to my station and tried to focus on my work. Every time I had to reach for something or bend down to check a lower shelf, I worried my pants would slide down. It was the longest 2 hours of my life. When my lunch break finally started at noon, I practically ran to my car. I drove straight to the discount store about 5 minutes down the road. The parking lot was absolutely packed when I pulled in. Cars were circling around looking for spaces, people were loading groceries into their trunks, shopping carts were scattered everywhere. I started driving up and down the aisles looking for anything open. Then I got lucky. Someone pulled out of the first spot right next to the handicapped spaces. Prime real estate on a busy day. I pulled in quick before anyone else could grab it. I shut off my engine, grabbed my wallet, and headed inside. The store was just as crowded inside as the parking lot. I walked straight to the men's clothing section and found the belts hanging on a rack. I grabbed a basic black one for $12.99. Nothing fancy, just something to get me through the rest of my shift. I could buy a nicer leather one this weekend when I had more time. I paid at the self-checkout and walked back out to the parking lot. When I reached my car, I pulled the belt out of the plastic packaging. I stood there next to my driver's side door and started threading it through my belt loops. I was about halfway through when I noticed a car had stopped in the lane directly behind my vehicle. A woman was sitting in the driver's seat staring at me. I figured she was waiting for my spot. Since the lot was so busy, I kept working on getting the belt through all the loops, trying to move a little faster since someone was waiting. I was buckling it when she rolled down her window. She yelled and asked if I had just pissed in the parking lot. I stopped what I was doing and asked her what she was talking about. She insisted that I had just urinated in the parking lot right there in public. She called it disgusting and kept going on about it. I realized this woman genuinely thought I had been standing there relieving myself in broad daylight in a crowded shopping center parking lot. I told her she was being ridiculous and asked who in their right mind would piss in the middle of a busy parking lot. I explained I had just bought a belt inside and was putting it on. I told her to mind her own business. She called it nonsense and kept insisting I had pissed right there. That's when I got annoyed. I called her an idiot and told her I hoped she wasn't planning on getting this parking spot. I made it clear she wasn't getting it. She shot back that she absolutely was getting my spot. I had about 35 minutes left of my lunch break. I had nowhere urgent to be. I got in my car, closed the door, and just sat there. She sat there too with her engine running. I could see her in my rearview mirror. She was gripping her steering wheel and staring at the back of my car. I crossed my arms and looked straight ahead out my windshield. I wasn't moving. 5 minutes passed, then 10. A couple of cars came up the aisle behind her, realized we were both just sitting there, and turned down other lanes to find different spots. After about 15 minutes, a kid who worked there came by, pushing a long line of shopping carts. The woman rolled down her window and started complaining to him. She was pointing at me and gesturing wildly. The kid just shrugged, said something I couldn't hear, and kept pushing his carts toward the store entrance. What was he supposed to do about two people having a standoff in the parking lot? At around the 20-minute mark, I started wondering if I was actually going to sit there for my entire lunch break. I only had about 15 minutes left before I needed to head back to work. Then I noticed a big pickup truck about 5 or 6 spots down from me on the same side. The reverse lights came on. The driver was trying to back out into the aisle, but he couldn't because this woman was blocking the entire lane. She had to back her car up a bit and angle it closer to the cars parked on the opposite side to give the truck room to maneuver. Right when she was repositioning, another car came up the aisle from the direction she had originally come from. The truck started slowly backing out. I saw my opening. I started my engine, threw my car in reverse, and backed out as fast as I safely could. The truck was blocking her view of my car. By the time she realized what was happening, I was already out of the spot and the truck was between us. She couldn't get around it to swoop in. The car that had just come up the aisle was right behind the truck now, because the woman had moved her car over to the side and wasn't using her turn signal or anything. That driver had no idea she was waiting. They went around her and pulled straight into the spot I had just vacated. I drove down to the end of the aisle and turned left. Then I circled back around so I could come up the next aisle over and see what happened. The woman completely lost it. She laid on her horn for what must have been 10 seconds straight. She was screaming at the person who took the spot. Her face was bright red and she was leaning halfway out her window. I couldn't hear exactly what she was saying, but I could see her mouth moving and she was clearly cursing up a storm. The driver who got my spot just looked at her, waved her off dismissively, and told her to get lost. Then they got out and walked toward the store entrance without looking back. While the woman was busy having her meltdown, I noticed the big truck had finished backing out and driven off. And in those few seconds, another car had pulled into that empty spot. So now she had been sitting there for probably 25 minutes and ended up with nothing. She was going to have to drive around and search for a spot like everyone else. I sat there in the next aisle for another minute just watching. She finally drove off, still looking furious. I checked the time on my dashboard. 12:43. I still had enough time to grab a quick bite from the drive-thru on my way back to work. I drove out of the parking lot grinning the entire time. I got a sandwich from the fast food place next door, ate it in my car back at the plant, and clocked back in at 1:28. Nobody at work knew why I was in such a good mood that afternoon. I was 17 when this happened. Just started my first semester at community college, and still living at home with my parents about an hour outside town. Everyone always told me I looked older than I actually was. People thought I was in my mid-20s sometimes. It never really bothered me until that day at the gas station. I just finished my morning classes and stopped to grab an energy drink before heading home. It was one of those rundown places off the highway that you only go to because it's convenient. The kind with flickering fluorescent lights and floors that always look dirty no matter how much they mop them. I walked back to the coolers and grabbed a 20-ounce Red Bull. I was tired from staying up late studying and needed the caffeine boost for the drive home. I turned around to head to the register and heard someone behind me. Some guy asked if I clocked in yet. I didn't think he was talking to me. Why would he be? I'd never seen this guy before in my life. I kept walking toward the front of the store with my drink. Suddenly, he was right in front of me. Like uncomfortably close. Stranger danger close. This man had to be at least 50 years old and he was in my face. I immediately backed up and put my hands in front of me. He screamed at me asking what I was doing. My heart jumped into my throat. Then he told me to get in the back. He said he didn't pay me to drink the store's products while I was supposed to be working. He also told me to put on my work shirt because they had a dress code. I was terrified. I'd never been in a situation like this before. No stranger had ever gotten in my face and yelled at me. My hands started shaking and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I stammered out that I thought he was mistaking me for someone else. At least I think that's what I said. My adrenaline was pumping so hard I could barely hear my own voice. All I knew was I needed to get out of there. I turned around and started walking quickly toward the door. My eyes were burning, and I felt like I was about to cry because that's just what happens when I get anxious. My body decides tears are the appropriate response to danger. I was almost to the door when I felt a hand grab my shoulder hard and yank me backward. He yelled at me to come back. Something inside me just snapped. Fight or flight kicked in hard. I looked down and realized I still had the Red Bull in my hand. Without thinking, I threw it right at his face. The big can went flying through the air. The owner let go and ducked. The can missed his head by inches and crashed into a display behind him. I ran outside and stood next to my car watching the door. My hands were still shaking. I didn't have a cell phone back then. Most kids my age didn't yet. I had no way to call anyone. My parents were over an hour away. I didn't know what to do. Should I just drive away? Should I wait? What if he came back out? That's when two things happened at almost the exact same time. The owner came out of the store looking frantic and a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot. The cop must have just been stopping to grab some food or coffee. When the owner saw the cop, his whole demeanor changed. He started walking toward me with his hands up. He apologized over and over. He said it was a huge misunderstanding. He told me he thought I was someone else, one of his employees. He explained that she'd called out sick, but he didn't get the message. He said I looked exactly like her. He kept going on, apologizing and explaining, but I noticed he kept looking at the cop nervously. He probably assumed I'd already called the police. The cop walked over to us and asked what was going on. I explained what happened. The owner kept trying to downplay everything, saying it was just a mistake. No big deal. Just a case of mistaken identity. The cop asked him if he'd grabbed me. The owner admitted he touched my shoulder, but said he was just trying to get my attention. I told the cop that he yanked me back by my shoulder when I tried to leave. The owner insisted it wasn't like that. He said it was barely anything. The cop asked if there were security cameras. The owner said yes, but claimed you could barely see anything at that angle. He said the footage wasn't clear. The cop insisted on seeing the tape anyway. We all went back inside. The owner kept trying to make excuses, but the cop wasn't having it. He reviewed the footage right there. You could see everything clearly. The owner getting in my face, me backing away, me trying to leave, him grabbing my shoulder and yanking me back, the Red Bull flying through the air, all of it. The cop immediately called my parents. They drove down fast. When they got there and heard what happened, they were furious. The cop explained that since I was a minor, this was serious. He strongly suggested we press charges. We did. The owner kept apologizing, kept saying he made a mistake, that he'd lost his temper, that if I just explained who I was, everything would have been fine. But that wasn't my responsibility. I tried to tell him. He didn't listen. He grabbed me. He scared me. He put his hands on a minor. The case went to court. The owner lost his business. He ended up serving 4 months in prison because of what he did to me. 4 months behind bars for grabbing a 17-year-old girl in his store. But the scariest part of the whole thing was later when I saw a picture of the woman who actually worked there, the one he'd mistaken me for. She looked exactly like me. Same hair color, same face shape, same height, just older, like she could have been my mother or my aunt. It was eerie. If he'd just handled the situation differently, none of this would have happened. If he'd asked my name, if he'd listened when I tried to explain, if he hadn't grabbed me. But he didn't. He chose to get aggressive with someone he didn't even bother to confirm was his employee, and he paid the price for it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.